Mrs. Phillips is both alive and not a hallucination in GTA 5. These are facts. There is no uncertainty in the game. There are simply people who don't know much about GTA 5 who therefore confuse their lack of understanding for an actual mystery.
Number 15, Mrs. Phillips.
As you likely know, after the final mission of GTA 5, Trevor uniquely is given additional side missions. These being Mrs. Phillips, where Trevor's mother shows up and demands he steal her a truck of Deludamol.
I need you to get me some more Deludamol. A truckload, literally!
And the follow-up mission Damaged Goods that starts when we actually get the truck, which then concludes when Trevor returns to his trailer to find that Mrs. Phillips has vanished.
Mom! I got the mess! Mom! Mom! No, Mother!
Some people wrongly believe Mrs. Phillips is merely a delusion of Trevor's mind, and to show why this is false, I'm going to explain why every point in GatorKey's video defending the idea is incorrect. While this video will indirectly teach you how we know Mrs. Phillips is alive, that is not the focus of this video, as I already explained this in my Trevor lore video, and Gator does not dispute this conclusion. Gator's video instead argues that despite the fact that we know Mrs. Phillips is alive, what we see in the mission is still not her, and this is instead a hallucination. Just to be crystal clear, I did not make this video to be mean, and I hold no animosity towards Gator. I just like talking about GTA 5's lore. Before I begin with this video though, I need to point out the biggest issue with Gator's claim. This being that there is no need in the game for Mrs. Phillips to be a delusion. If Mrs. Phillips was dead, it would give a narrative justification for her to be a hallucination, as she naturally could not do all the things that we apparently see her do in the mission. Given she is alive though, there is nothing in the mission that requires her to be a delusion. Everything we see her do, a real physical person could do. Gator in his video unfortunately spends all his time arguing that her being a hallucination is consistent with what we see. But he never argues why Rockstar would bother making her one at all. He never explains what value he thinks it adds to the scene, leaving us to conclude that someone at Rockstar for absolutely no reason said, fuck it, make her fake, that could be cool.
Wow.
Not only would this be bad writing and inconsistent with Rockstar's normal quality,
Hello?
but it would also contradict everything else established by the game. So let us now look at the supposed evidence that Gator presents in his video.
Your mother, somebody you know is in prison, is now somehow in your trailer. Something that couldn't possibly be true. She's likely still in prison, exactly where Trevor thought she was.
One of the more puzzling things that Gator claims is that it's delusional to think that Mrs. Phillips could have actually been let out of prison. Stretch, one of the main antagonists of the game, is let out of prison early unexpectedly. We know he was not the only one, because the reason for his release was the government budget cuts. The cuts removed funding from the prison system, which resulted in the need to let people out early to cut costs. These are the same budget cuts that inspire the FIB and IAA to attack each other throughout the game. Franklin and Lamar were surprised Stretch was getting out of prison, in the same way Trevor in the mission is surprised Mrs. Phillips is getting out.
Stretch getting out, huh? He getting out? Then the state is in some real motherfucking trouble, nigga. I didn't think no amount of overcrowding would put that nigga back on the streets, dawg.
Budgetary realignment, homie. They're lining the homie right up out of Bolingbroke.
In other words, not only does the story explicitly give us a justification for why Mrs. Phillips would be let out of prison and show up unexpectedly to surprise Trevor,
I didn't know they let you out.
people being unexpectedly let out of prison early is literally a central plot point of the entire game.
This Strangers and Freaks mission with Trevor's mother is interesting because it only appears at the end of the game. It's impossible for this mission to appear while you're playing the story, it has to be completed after. So that alone is interesting. Why can Trevor's mum not appear before the story is over?
You can ask the question, why did Rockstar not spawn it earlier or later for any side mission regardless of when it spawned? Simply asking that question doesn't imply a mystery, it had to spawn at some point. If it had instead spawned before the final mission, Gator would simply say, why does the entire game basically have to be over before she appears? If the mission spawned anywhere near after Bury the Hatchet, he'd say, why can she only appear after Trevor is mentally destroyed by Michael's betrayal? If it spawned anywhere near after Monkey Business, he'd say, why can it only spawn after Trevor gives back Patricia to Martin? I mean hell, if it spawned after Fame or Shame at the start of the game, he'd simply say, why does she only appear after Trevor was mentally shook by finding out Michael is alive? Such questions are not evidence. Gator isn't actually giving any argument for why this point in the game more favors her being a delusion than her being real, he is just asserting that things are strange to fabricate ambiguity. Contrary to Gator's assertions, however, I can't think of a better time in the story for it to have spawned. It seemingly exists not just to give us some insight into Trevor as a character, but also to pay off all the references to Trevor's childhood and mother throughout the game, both of which are hinted to be a significant cause of why Trevor is as mentally damaged as he is.
I had a difficult childhood.
Understandably, it makes sense for the payoff to come after the player experiences the hints at Trevor's past, many of which only exist in hangouts and other side content.
He is such a turd! That wounded childhood bullshit. We all have shitty childhoods, you balding lump. Most of us don't act like that, turd.
The location of these hints requires a player to have completed a lot of the game to fully understand and appreciate the scenes with Trevor's mum. So what better time is there than at the very end of the game for this mission to spawn, where it gives a lot of time for the player to develop an interest in Trevor's childhood. Besides, while it is nice to get a glimpse at Trevor's childhood, it isn't necessary for the story to progress at any point, just like any other side mission. There is therefore no explicit advantage or need for it to have spawned earlier. Despite this, I think it was a smart move for Rockstar to include this mission, given how Trevor differs from the other two main characters in the story. Franklin and Michael both have many close personal side characters that have known them for decades, and who can therefore give us first-hand insight into how and why we find them as they are in the story. With Trevor, on the other hand, it's not even clear how many years ago he met Ron, but it was certainly much less than 9 years ago, as it was after he had already spent some time on the run from the law. Wade, we explicitly know he is only known for a year after Trevor killed his friends, and Floyd we see him meet during the main story. Trevor also violently bullies all of them anyway, which makes them unreliable as sources of information. In fact, the best character we have to learn of Trevor is Michael, but not only does Michael fear Trevor, he also didn't know him when he was young. Mrs. Phillips, on the other hand, doesn't have any such issues, and therefore is able to give us insight into Trevor that we can't get anywhere else in the game. Given that Trevor is the most messed up of the three main characters, I think it would have been a missed opportunity had Rockstar not shown us some explanation. Also, regardless of whether or not it was their intention, the timing of this mission helps reinforce that none of GTA 5's endings really fix Trevor's issues. With the canon ending C, Franklin and Michael grow as characters and largely get what they want. Michael gets his criminal history wiped clean, he once again has money and no debt, and he further rebuilds his relationship with his family and is now living his dream making movies. Franklin gets out of the hood and moves to somewhere safer, he gains connections to the criminal world, and he now has fuck tons of money. But Trevor though, what does he really get at the end of the game? He didn't even really care about the money they stole in the big score.
And I also want to give you my share of the money we boosted in this last score. I don't really need it. I want you to be happy.
Well, I don't need it either, and I don't want it. It was never about the money, Michael.
When we first met Trevor, he had over $100,000 that he didn't even bother to spend. This side mission with Mrs. Phillips appearing at the end of the game reminds us that Trevor doesn't really get a happy ending. Yes, the government isn't looking for him anymore, but at this point that didn't really seem to be hampering his life at all. Honestly, the best thing he gets is the connections to the more complete lives of Michael and Franklin, and that is really sad to say out loud. Trevor's issues with his life, past and present, that cause him to be a broken, unfulfilled mess remain unresolved, and he therefore doesn't grow as a person in the same way Michael and Franklin do. He is arguably just as fucked up as he was before he even met Michael, and I therefore wonder if it was intended for the originally planned single-player DLCs to involve Trevor finding a more complete happy ending. Long story short, I don't see the timing of this mission within the wider context of the game to be strange at all, and I think it's actually a very good time for us.
Now this is an interesting cutscene because it's all about Trevor's guilt, how terrible he feels and his past. It's very clear that Trevor loves his mother, but he never wrote to her and he never visited her while she was locked up. For that he carries a lot of guilt, and that's a part of the reason why he's so upset in this cutscene. Now that's the entirety of the cutscene. It's pretty much just Trevor's guilt and her making him feel bad.
This is a very shallow interpretation of this scene. The way Trevor acts in these side missions is less to do with the lack of writing to his mother, and more due to the intense conflicting feelings he has towards his mother. As Michael rightly says, Trevor has mother issues.
Yeah, Trevor ain't changed at all. He's always had anger issues. And other issues.
Oh! Well, what? Other issues?
Mother issues.
Trevor refers to his mother as a sweet woman, a delicate flower, who in his current state he believes he could never be enough for her.
She's such a sweet woman. A delicate flower. I don't want her to see me like this.
Mother issues.
I will cut a hole in your throat and pull your tongue out if it even looks like it's starting to form the letter M.
And anger issues.
Okay, I see.
Even when recalling the sexual abuse of his childhood, he still makes excuses for her.
Hey, yo, who the fuck is this motherfucker? Hey, what's cracking on me? What you doing around here, man?
Me?
Yeah, you motherfucker.
It's not legally fucking if you do not penetrate. Shit!
Trevor is obviously delusional about who his mother is. Contrary to his claims, she is clearly very abusive, physically and sexually, and has never shown him the love a mother would traditionally give her son. Rockstar is showing this to enlighten us as to what fucked Trevor up. We directly get to see the source of influence that Trevor had during his formative years. Mrs. Phillips amazingly insults Trevor in more than 20 unique ways in under 2.5 minutes. She insults how he greets her, that he didn't write to her, that he didn't visit, that he didn't get married, that he isn't the gay son she wanted, that he forgot about her, that he was always ungrateful for everything she gave him, that he is wretched, that he is sniveling, that he is a sack of shit, that there was always something wrong with him, that he is ashamed of himself, that he is ashamed of her, that he left her to wait for him for hours, that he didn't get her a drink, that he didn't get her a cigarette, that he didn't give her a massage, that he doesn't appreciate his youth, that he has no feelings inside. She then literally knees him in the face before blaming him for her being old, tired and alone, and as well for not appropriately supporting her, before insulting him for suggesting she wants money.
I don't got no insurance.
Oh, I got money!
I don't want your goddamn money! Is that what you think I am? A prostitute? Still? You're sick.
She concludes all of this by saying outright that Trevor is sick. She's obviously right. Trevor is sick, but everything implies that she made him this way. Most of Mrs. Phillips' complaints in this scene are irrational, especially as many of them are literally impossible for Trevor to have done. She sets expectations for Trevor that he literally cannot meet and then belittles him for not meeting them, showing him hate and violence that no mother should ever show their child. Trevor isn't sad here because of his guilt over not sending a letter. Trevor is eternally guilty for not living up to his mother's standards. He is this way because his mother has emotionally abused and manipulated him for decades to the degree he worships her and feels he can never be good enough for her. Compare the Trevor we see in these scenes to how we see him in every other scene in the game. Trevor normally acts combatively towards everyone. He is instinctively fierce, aggressive, angry, attacking at a moment's notice. But at the same time, he begs for love and acceptance.
Why can't we all just be together, huh?
In some cases, we literally see him instantly flip between these two states. Through our brief interaction with Mrs. Phillips, we learn that Trevor in the game acts towards others just like his mother acts towards him. He controls those around him in the same way his mother controlled him, and his demand for love clearly comes from not receiving it in his early life. Around his mother, we see a Trevor we don't see anywhere else. He is weak, pathetic, servile, doing anything to please. He effectively becomes Ron, showing how the fucked up relationship he has with his mother is one he replicates with those around him.
You might forego your cut to alleviate my heartache.
I might? Yeah, I mean I will. Good idea.
Trevor's mother was sent to prison for something, and she's been there for the past 9 years. Obviously, she did something pretty bad to end up in prison for the past 9 years.
Nothing explicitly says that Mrs. Phillips has been in prison for 9 years. All we know is that prior to the 9-year time skip, when Trevor was doing crimes with Michael, Mrs. Phillips met Michael and Amanda.
Are those lips fake as well, or just the tits?
How's your mom, Trevor? I miss her.
Despite this, it seems like they didn't know she went to jail. You would imagine that if she'd gone to jail 9 or more years ago when Trevor was interacting with Amanda and Michael before the time skip, that this would have come up in conversation and they'd therefore know about it. As I explained before, Trevor's surprise at seeing Mrs. Phillips being let out of prison does not at all suggest that Mrs. Phillips 9 years ago was given a 9-year or greater sentence.
I'm afraid it's been 9 years.
In fact, it would have been a remarkable coincidence if Mrs. Phillips happened to commit some significant crime around the same time as the Ludendorff job, and therefore she went to jail at the same time that Trevor went on the run. There is also nothing that explicitly tells us what crimes she committed, or their severity, but she is a drug addict and okay with stealing drugs, so you could imagine it would have something to do with that. One significant issue with determining how many years it's been since she's seen Trevor is that we don't have an exact timeline for what Trevor did while he was on the run from the law. We simply don't know how much time he spent, as Lester says, traveling from place to place before he ended up in Sandy Shores. We therefore don't know how long he's been living there. At the very least, Mrs. Phillips suggests she has not seen his trailer before.
So, you've done well for yourself.
and Ron's Life Invader message says he has not met her previously. These facts make the case that she has not come to see him in Sandy Shores in the past. However, she could still have met up with him at any point while he was on the run before he moved there. Trevor must have at least had some contact with her to know she'd been taken to jail. The bottom line is all we can really say for certain is that she'd never been to Trevor's trailer before, and most likely during the 9-year time skip she was sentenced to some amount of jail time. We have no way of knowing any more than that.
But one day she just appears in Trevor's trailer out of the blue. It's a bit weird, isn't it?
As I mentioned previously, she is foreshadowed as significant and her time of appearance makes logical sense.
Now once you find a truckload of Deludamol, you bring it back to Trevor's trailer where there is another short cutscene. Trevor will run inside the trailer and his mother will be gone. Why would Trevor's mother just disappear before Trevor gets back with a truckload of painkillers that she said she really needed?
She is a criminal drug addict, perhaps a class of people most well known for appearing and disappearing on a whim. Think about it for a moment. What possible need could any person have with a truck full of pills? Realistically, you could want a truck full of pills, but you couldn't possibly need one. I think it is perfectly in line with Mrs. Phillips' character for her to just abandon her son, popping in and out of his life when she sees fit, and we see her literally do this in these missions.
Oh, mother!
Narratively, this scene shows us that Trevor's abandonment issues come from his experiences with his mother.
Everyone I love abandoned me.
This is what adds to the tragedy of Michael's betrayal of Trevor. Trevor finally found someone who he thought was his best friend, and this person abandoned him too.
You were my best friend. I grieved for you!
Even Lamar on Pac-Man, when hearing of Trevor's tale, says Trevor has abandonment issues.
Homie, you sound like some bitch he ain't called. Like, he lied to me.
It's a lonely old road, ain't it?
A road's a road. It ain't got abandonment issues.
Don't leave me again, or this time I will come for you in your sleep.
Cool. I'm not going anywhere.
Trevor is fundamentally broken and unable to form normal relationships, and he blames himself for this because his mother taught him everything is his fault. The only proven delusion is not Mrs. Phillips herself, but Trevor's perception of who she is as a person. Trevor is delusional in that he thinks his mother is an angel when in reality she's a devil.
In the game, Deludamol is an extra-strength painkiller, and it can be found outside of most hospitals and pharmacies. Now, it's based on the real-life drug with the brand name Dilardid. Now, it's pronounced Dilardid, but when you look at the word, your first attempt would probably be deluded. And that's where Rockstar got the idea to call the drug Deludamol. The word Deludamol is a play on the word delusional.
As Gator rightly points out, these Deludamol trucks can be found outside of the mission, so I'm not even sure Rockstar really meant anything by the inclusion of this particular drug. It's possible that they just wanted to communicate that she's a drug addict, and therefore any drug would have served this purpose. Gator then moves on to speak of the chemical nature of Deludamol.
It's a very strong painkiller, but the entire brand is about what's happening inside your mind. Their slogan is for a night you'll never remember, and the word is referencing delusions. Now, if we take a look back at the real-life drug Dilardid that Deludamol is based on, one of the side effects is hallucinations. So the pills that Trevor is sent to collect are centered around things that happened inside your mind that aren't real. Delusions and hallucinations. Now firstly, what are the chances that the drug that Trevor's mother sends him to get is centered around things that aren't real?
What are you talking about? The pills aren't centered around delusions or things that aren't real. You just admitted yourself, they're very strong painkillers. Mrs. Phillips is being portrayed as a drug addict, and all drugs that drug addicts want affect the brain. That's why they want them. Their chosen drug impacting the brain is therefore not significant because it's not possible for it to have been otherwise while she was still being portrayed as an addict. I don't think it has to be the case that their choice of drug was meant to symbolize something. However, if we want to see it as significant, a better interpretation is that Trevor is delivering literal painkillers to the source of his pain, his mother. The whole mission is centered around explaining the internal pain that he showcases throughout the game. As for the side effects of the real-life drug, in my country of Australia, delusions are not even listed as a side effect. In America, with the Food and Drug Administration, transient hallucinations are one of the 23 possible side effects. Not only are we insanely reaching at this point, but this sort of hallucination only lasts seconds or minutes. In other words, instead of picking one of the endless drugs that actually give you delusions, Rockstar picked a very strong painkiller for her to be addicted to. The facts simply do not match what Gator wants to be true.
You can't re-enter Trevor's safe house, you cannot enter the trailer again until you've got a truckload of Deludamol, meaning we cannot see Trevor's mother as an NPC. But when you're standing outside of the trailer, you can hear Trevor's mother. She does have voice lines.
My dude, she locked the door. This showcases the degree of control and dominance she has over Trevor. She takes his home as her own. It's a fairly standard power play. A similar thing happens in the game with Aunt Denise and Franklin.
Nah, don't you step foot in this yard.
Why? It's half my house.
Now I'ma call the police.
Denise locks Franklin out of the house he partly owns, and you can only hear her voice from inside.
I'm meditating, boy. Y'all disturbing my peace, calm, and tranquility.
Being locked out of my own house kind of screws with my inner peace as well.
When you are trying to force everything to fit your desired conclusion, a locked door can no longer just be a locked door. It has to be a grand conspiracy.
Rockstar never planned for her to be seen in anything other than cutscenes. They're hiding her for a reason. They didn't create an NPC for her for a reason. Would it really have been that difficult for Rockstar to just create an NPC for Trevor's mother?
She does have an NPC, a model for her character. It's the one you see in the cutscene. GTA 5's cutscenes are not videos. They use the actual character models and move them around in real time. You can find her model yourself with any competent mod menu. Moreover, there are many named characters that only appear in cutscenes. In GTA 5 single player alone, there is Deborah, Hugh Harrison, Anita Mendoza, Natalia Zevorvna.
Do you know who I am?
Grzegorz Brzęczyszczykiewicz. Brzęczyszczykiewicz. Grzegorz.
Smart kid.
Oscar Guzman, and even Martin Madrazo. A character only appearing in cutscenes is not significant. Next, Gator brings up that if you glitch your way through the locked door and into Trevor's trailer, you can see that the model behind the door that is saying Mrs. Phillips' lines outside the cutscenes is actually a made model rather than Mrs. Phillips herself.
Now this is the game spawning an NPC to match the voice lines of Trevor's mother, because that's where she is when she speaks. But it's spawning maids because they don't have an official NPC for Trevor's mother. Rockstar never planned for her to be seen in anything other than cutscenes.
As I say, they do have a model. However, when making video games, it is common for devs to take shortcuts when it comes to things players are never meant to see. For example, while the janitor officially appears first in the mission cleaning out the bureau, his character model is actually used much earlier for two of the people we scan on the mission Eye in the Sky. The janitor isn't a secret triplet or something. A dev just got lazy with something that is normally impossible for players to see. I could sit here for hours showing you hundreds of shortcuts that the devs took when making GTA 5, but there's no reason to. What Gator is pointing to isn't significant, it's just the standard thing that devs do when making any game.
This mounted gun may prove useful.
Hey, we got the rifle charged up.
That doesn't look like Alex to me! It's also weird to think that Rockstar would make a character a delusion, and they would then attempt to communicate this to us by using something that is normally impossible for players to see. It probably doesn't surprise you to learn that Gator also finds the ending of the missions questionable.
Trevor will then break down and start crying on the floor, and we will be forced to swap character to Franklin. Another interesting detail, they force us to swap character.
Without even thinking too hard. I can think of half a dozen force switches in the game, and simply pointing to one and saying, that's interesting, that's special, doesn't make it so. In this case, had we maintained control of Trevor, after he finished that animation of him crying on the ground, he'd return to his default state. In other words, he'd snap back onto his feet and not look sad at all, which obviously would ruin the scene. Rockstar understandably would want to avoid that by adding something to prevent it, and it appears they went with a character switch. This further allowed us to later switch back to Trevor, to find him now taking drugs to cope with his mother abandoning him. Perhaps they wanted to suggest that Trevor in part takes drugs as a coping mechanism for his childhood trauma.
We will never hear or see anything about Trevor's mum again.
Because the game's over! There is literally no place to hear anything about Trevor's mum again in single player. With that being said, we traditionally don't hear anything about any of the side characters after we complete their missions, because by design, they are not meant to impact the main story. Although given that there was originally planned for a Trevor-focused single-player DLC until it was scrapped in favor of GTA Online, maybe this content would have given us more interactions with her. Regardless of whether or not this was the case though, not hearing more about her isn't strange, it's entirely expected.
During the time that we're forced to swap to Franklin after the mission ends, there's nothing that suggests that there's a major time jump. We're able to swap right back to Trevor.
Character switches in GTA 5 are not consistent with how much time is implied to have passed. That would be incredibly difficult to do with any of the consistent unique switch scenes in the game. One player might switch to the character instantly when the scene becomes available, and another might play the game for many in-game hours before switching and experiencing the same scene.
Hey Mike. It's Franklin, man. I'm following the architect.
It is hard to have a scene that makes sense time-wise in both cases. At the end of the Merryweather offshore approach, for example, we see Michael drive off, and if we immediately switch to him when we're able to, he is already in Los Santos near his home. His traveling this far is literally impossible. Even driving the car at max speed, he would not have got that far. Does this mean that we now have to include in the lore that Michael has magic teleporting powers? No, it is just a video game where a consistent flow of time isn't strictly adhered to. With that being said, despite how inconsistent the passage of time is, switches are still meant to imply some passage of time. It is therefore wrong for Gator to assert that a significant amount of time couldn't have passed between these switches.
When you walk outside, Trevor's truck is positioned in a very weird angle. The truckload of Deludamol is of course gone. Now how would you explain the truckload of Deludamol vanishing too? How would you genuinely explain that? What would you just say? Oh, Trevor went outside, drove it away somewhere and walked back? So what happened in that limited amount of time? Did Ron go out there and move the van of Deludamol?
Gator is creating a mystery where there is none. The truck of Deludamol was removed because mission assets tend to despawn after a mission ends and you leave the area, like when you character switch. In fact, it would have been very remarkable if the truck of Deludamol had stayed, despite us switching character. Obviously, Rockstar's mission cleanup does create logical inconsistencies throughout the game if you think about it too hard. For example, at the end of the Merryweather Freighter approach, there is a mini-sub. If you switch away from Trevor and then switch back, it vanishes. Have we now discovered some super fast magic submarine thief? No, this is just how Rockstar programmed the game. We are just meant to suspend disbelief and conclude that while we were away, this stuff was handled. Like, does it really make sense to be playing a video game where a normal human being gets shot thousands of times and then also say, you know what, it's not realistic for a truck to disappear? That's some very selective suspension of disbelief.
And why is Trevor's truck parked vertical up against the entrance to his trailer? He's never parked like that ever before, and it's a very weird way to park. Notice how Trevor's truck is also parked in the exact location that the mission told us to park the truckload of Deludamol, right in front of his gate. Did Trevor go out there, move the van of Deludamol, and then for some reason park his truck vertically? It doesn't make sense. I don't think it was real. I believe Trevor was on drugs and hallucinating, and that's why his truck is parked so weirdly. He thought he was driving the truckload of Deludamol, but he was actually driving his own truck. He was high and off of his mind, so he parked his truck vertically on his way back to see if his mother was still in the trailer. So I do not believe it's out of the realm of possibility that he just hallucinated everything because of the drugs that he was on.
Before I start explaining Trevor's truck, it's important to remember that we're playing a video game with different rules than what we experience in reality. It is expected that some things won't make realistic sense, even though they will make logical sense based on the mechanics of the game. Additionally, remember that video games are made by people, and our explanations for things in video games should follow from that understanding. So if a writer wanted to suggest that something was amiss in these scenes, like what we saw as players wasn't real and something entirely different happened, they would naturally do more than perfectly park a car sideways. Something that a person on reality-altering drugs would not be expected to do. Consider the movie Wolf of Wall Street, for example. Despite the main character being on drugs and barely managing to crawl into his car, he still arrives home safely. The writers explicitly tell us that from the main character's perspective, he drove home without issue, not even getting a scratch on his car.
By some miracle, I made it home alive. Not a scratch on me or the car.
This makes it very funny when we later see that he actually entirely wrecked his car and he was instead hallucinating last night. Basically, I find it hard to believe that Rockstar is as bad at writing as Gator seems to believe. If those who wrote these missions wanted Trevor's truck to signify something, it would be through the wall of Trevor's trailer, not slightly angled out on the road. More than this, if a writer wants us to have the possibility of reaching a conclusion that they prefer, they will work to establish a mechanism by which we can know that thing can actually happen. In The Wolf of Wall Street, it is very well established how powerful the drugs they are taking are.
Pow! I mean, I had skipped the tingle phase and went straight to the drool phase.
In GTA 5, on the other hand, we don't even see Trevor doing drugs before or during these side missions. More importantly, the entire game shows us explicitly that if we are on drugs, we will see that visually, and our gameplay will be impacted. There is no exception to this in the entire game. It is therefore hard to see Gator's conclusions as plausible, given that we experience none of these things during the mission. That is until after the entire mission is over, and we then see Trevor actually do drugs, and we therefore see and experience all the normal things we do when Trevor is on drugs. The most prominent example of Trevor doing drugs and experiencing persistent long-term hallucinations is with Barry on Grassroots. From this mission, we can see that Rockstar makes it very clear visually when Trevor is hallucinating. Despite this, Gator doesn't even try to make an argument as to why they wouldn't do this in the Mrs. Phillips mission. He makes no attempt to argue that there's some value in fooling the player in the way that he describes. Basically, a car being slightly misaligned and the game's mechanics not being consistent with reality are not sufficient evidence for Gator's beliefs, especially as his beliefs would require us to ignore everything previously established by the game and also believe that Rockstar is terrible at writing scenarios despite all evidence to the contrary. Now for the moment you've been waiting for. What are the actually plausible explanations as to why Trevor's car is misaligned? The first possible explanation is that it's just an error, one of the thousands that Rockstar made while making a game of this size. This was the position that my team took when they looked at the code. They believe Rockstar just screwed up. I, however, have a different theory. I think the mission was relocated. It has always been weird to me that this mission happens at Trevor's trailer, given that Trevor at this point in the story is already using the strip club as his main place of residence. If the mission was originally designed to be at the strip club and later moved to his trailer, it would explain three oddities. To start with, the player parking for the strip club is sideways in the same way the car appears at Trevor's trailer. It is possible that they just copied over the orientation of the player's car and forgot to change it. The second oddity that the move would explain is Mrs. Phillips' line where she says,
"So, you've done well for yourself."
I don't think this line makes a lot of sense while she's standing in a trailer that's covered in garbage, but it would make sense if she was originally going to say it at Trevor's new fancy strip club. Lastly, the mission being moved could explain why a dev might hastily throw a bunch of lines into a made model rather than taking the time to put Mrs. Phillips' model there.
I only answer the door to a real man.
I said earlier that it's interesting that we're only able to complete this stranger's mission after the story is complete, and I think the reason for that is because this hallucination is linked to Mrs. Madrazo. Trevor has a major bond with Mrs. Madrazo because she reminds him of his mother. She's an elderly woman who lives with him, cooks for him, cleans, and takes care of him. Now obviously Trevor's mother was cruel, she wasn't any of that, but Trevor has mother issues, so Mrs. Madrazo filled the role. After 9 years, Mrs. Madrazo has refreshed the memory of Trevor's mother. That's all he's thinking about, a mother role. Mrs. Madrazo and his actual mother. He has to give her back, and then suddenly Trevor's mother appears in his trailer? Even if this theory isn't true, that is ridiculous timing.
Trevor and Mrs. Madrazo's relationship obviously still makes just as much sense if his mother showed up physically at his trailer. The motivation for the relationship is still the same. Trevor craves love and acceptance, and her being a delusion is entirely unnecessary for it to exist. Additionally, again, there is no evidence that it's been 9 years since Trevor has seen his mother, and his mother is referenced many times in the game, so he didn't need Mrs. Madrazo to remind him of her. More importantly, Trevor giving up Patricia happened ages before Mrs. Phillips showed up. It is not at all ridiculous timing as Gator claims. The last time Trevor physically sees Mrs. Madrazo and experiences his heartfelt goodbye with her is the end of the mission Monkey Business. So that is 19 main missions before this side mission spawns. Again, remember this game was made by human beings. If they wanted to imply the pain of giving back Mrs. Madrazo caused Trevor to generate a hallucination of his mother, they'd communicate that better than this. It is not reasonable to conclude that a writer at Rockstar thought the player will understand that 19 missions ago when Trevor said goodbye to Mrs. Madrazo, that this would cause a one-time psychotic break eons later at the end of the game, and they will make this connection despite that Monkey Business in no way references Trevor's mother, and the missions with his mother in no way reference Mrs. Madrazo. While we don't need any more reasons to doubt this, what makes it even less likely is that Trevor does not completely say goodbye to Patricia. They still keep in touch, they email, they text, they talk on the phone.
Trevor, oh, I miss you.
Mrs. Madrazo is not entirely out of his life. Lastly, I think people put too much emphasis on Mrs. Madrazo being of a similar age to Mrs. Phillips, and so they forget Trevor's normal behavior towards women. Trevor implies he's attracted to basically every woman he meets in the game, and he always ends up making some sexual comments about them. The first thing he says to Amanda is that he likes her new fake tits.
Nice new tits, by the way.
He hits on Aunt Denise the second he sees her.
Hello, Missy.
Why don't you go get yourself something nice, okay?
Is it $7?
He hits on Molly every single chance he gets. He even tries to get Franklin to hit on Molly on his behalf.
Say hello from me to Molly.
He almost instantly asks Deborah to marry him.
Will you marry me?
Do you not remember how he acts towards Mary Ann on Trevor's exercising demon side mission?
Ah! Oh, I love you. Oh, let me take you away from all of this.
You completely have no control of your emotions. We have nothing in common.
Oh, baby, we're made for each other.
All these women are not his mother's age. Trevor craves love in general, which makes it so he instantly hits on Patricia when he meets her, and this allows for their relationship to blossom when she reciprocates.
Listen, beautiful. You know, I'm sorry about everything that's happened.
You are a good man. I can see that.
You need your eyes examined, then.
It is important to remember, though, that he doesn't instantly transfer the love and reverence he has for his mother onto Patricia. Instead, he talks about potentially needing to cut Patricia up and put her down the drain.
Might have to chop you up into little pieces before spraying your pulp mess down the drain, but I really hope it doesn't come to that.
I appreciate your honesty.
This is something he couldn't even think of saying about his mother. It's certainly possible that Mrs. Madrazo, being older, would have had an appeal to Trevor, but his behavior towards every other woman in the game shows that sex, love, and acceptance are more his interest, rather than specifically gaining a mother figure. So in conclusion, this particular video from Gator was not very good. He repeatedly points to things he doesn't understand, asserts they are inexplicable, then claims they mean Mrs. Phillips is a hallucination. He never bothers to explain why he thinks Rockstar would even want to make her a delusion, nor does he ever try to argue Mrs. Phillips being a hallucination better explains anything he references compared to her actually being there physically. Even had he succeeded in arguing that her being fake would be consistent with what we experience, this alone would not make it true. He also mistakenly left out conflicting evidence, like Ron's life-embedded message to Trevor, which does at least suggest that he heard Mrs. Phillips in the trailer. I think the biggest problem with this video, though, is that it was his third video. The third video I made for this channel was bad. Hell, the first 100 videos I made were bad. This is obviously not a dog. Gator's other videos do often contain within them information I didn't know, and they can showcase a sincere effort to dig down and unearth information previously unknown to the community, or at the very least, to present previously known information in an engaging way. There is clearly a demand for this sort of content, and I'm happy Gator continues to inspire interest in GTA 5 so many years after its release. It was just unfortunate for Gator that Mrs. Phillips as a topic differs from others that he's covered on his channel. There are some things that Rockstar has left without a definitive answer. However, when it comes to mysteries, like the bank manager from Prologue being in the big score, Rockstar very clearly didn't intend to create a mystery that would leave players puzzled. So when these meme mysteries pop up, there aren't a bunch of hints left by Rockstar for an inquisitive person to follow. This means that prior to my having a decade of experience making GTA 5 videos, along with having a team of people who helped me make them, I simply couldn't have made this video. While I may look very smart in my other lore videos, I assure you while making them that I did find out some things about the lore that I didn't know before, and I found out that I was wrong at least a handful of times. Basically, I hope no one sees this video as an attack on Gator. I just like talking about GTA 5's lore. Responding to his video was just the most efficient way to speak on that perspective. If you too want me to speak more on GTA 5's lore, feel free to leave in my Discord any prominent GTA 5 video that you want to see me try to refute. Hey, maybe we can get out a few more before GTA 6. Thanks so much for watching, and I wish you all the best.